Why would I be overreacting to bacteria and mold in homes? Um, so there's a lot of possible situations here, right? So, like I said earlier, if you have electromagnetic fields, as most of us do, as I'm sure you do because you're on X, and so you have access to technology, you're not living in a village, um, mold will grow in response to non-native electromagnetic fields. It proliferates. So in some people, in a lot of people, I think in all of us, probably we have more mold than our ancestors did in our bodies. And it's actually there protecting us from the electromagnetic radiation. At the same time, it can be causing symptoms, right? So it's not that like it's just going to overgrow and protect you and not do anything else. At the same time, it will cause symptoms. Your immune system will respond to the overgrowth and try to beat it back, right? But it will continue to be overgrown as long as you're exposed to electromagnetic radiation. So that's one situation. The other situation is people like mold spores in the air. People react to them. People become very, hypersensitive to them. And again, there's a lot of different reasons behind this. So why somebody's immune system could become overactive. Like, just for example, one thing that we've seen, like a specific kind of like patient kind of profile, you might say, is somebody who, so let's just say maybe they had like an overbearing parent or something, like a bad childhood, a lot of trauma, and they decided I'm going to be the opposite of that, right? And it's like a deeply ingrained kind of like personality trait at that point, right? Once they're 30, 40, 50, 60. It's not something that they're like kind of choosing, but it's just kind of who they've become. But it is rooted in like what happened to them when they were younger than they can remember, right? And then some things that happen when they could remember. So anyway, they become like super nice to everyone, right? They're like a doormat. People just walk all over them, and they're always doing things for everyone, and they think that they're doing like the right thing. They're like a saint, right? But really, it's like an imbalance in their character, I would say. And their, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like bad, but at the end of the day, you have to tell people the truth that like you're on this earth to perfect yourself, right? You're not here to just like be a jellyfish and just like float around and just eat and drink and sleep and and then die. You're here to benefit yourself and try to benefit other people. And what that means is that you have to try to get closer and closer to the good, right? And whatever you believe the good is, God or a general good, and that means becoming better over time, right? So either you get worse or you get better. There's no really staying still in this reality, in this world. So anyway, my point here is that they become doormat, but they still their whole being has to find some balance. So there is a part of them, say their immune system, that becomes super badass. Okay, and it's kind of beating up itself, unfortunately. But it's happening as a reaction to this kind of like outward, um, this outward behavior of letting yourself be, you know, overrun by other people's needs and not paying attention to your own. So the kind of like the balancing that happens internally is that some other part of them becomes overactive and really angry and worked up. And so that may sound ridiculous to people, but this is what we actually see literally. So anyway, that's just one example of something that could happen. Like, why might you be reacting to things? There's a lot of other examples. It can also be just like come down to trauma, where you need to resolve some trauma, and now every little thing, you jump at it. It's kind of like somebody who has PTSD, essentially, right? So your body has developed PTSD. So maybe you had some, infection or something, and it nearly killed you or whatever, and now your body is traumatized by it, and you need to let it go, right? So unfortunately, mind body medicine, a lot of people think it's just woo woo stupid junk, but again, there's a lot of data that shows that it's real. You cannot um, treat people without taking into account their thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. So that's something important to look at. And the other thing, you know, could also be, so the other thing that we see is that people are exposed to toxins, And when you get an acute illness, your body is trying to release the toxins, right? So that's one way of interpreting what an acute illness is. So people need to realize that the illnesses they experience are not usually the problem itself. They are the reaction to the problem and oftentimes the solution to the problem. But say somebody goes 30, 40, 50 years, and every couple of years or even every year, they have a flu like syndrome and they treat it with antihistamines and antivirals and they just tamp it down and they may even take steroids and they prevent the body from releasing the toxins that have built up over time, right? And so over the course of decades, you get more and more toxic buildup, and also you might even get infections and dysbiosis. So like your like certain bacteria that started off as being helpful might become overgrown because you're just not letting your body get rid of them. Um, and then pathogenic strains and pathogenic bacteria may also get in, and your body isn't fully able to uproot them and throw them out because you inhibit the symptoms of the illness, which are your body trying to get them out, right? So over time, you get more and more problem, multiple, infections and viruses, bacteria, maybe even mold, and it's just like it's building over time, and your immune system's trying harder and harder, and eventually you might develop an autoimmune disease. You might develop this kind of like reactivity where you get exposed to something and your immune system just like jumps on it right away. So trying to like unwind this can be very difficult, and usually it involves some discomfort. You have to accept you're going to feel uncomfortable because you've spent too long trying to be comfortable, right? So that is your imbalance, right? So it comes back to this idea that this was a Substack I published. It wasn't super popular, but people need to hear it, that real medicine is usually going to be bitter medicine. It's usually going to be the thing that you don't want to do, because the things you've been doing and that you love to do are what have gotten you into the problem that you're in. So taking painkillers for the last 30 years is going to create a problem. And now you're going to have to swear off of painkillers and you're going to have to be in pain for a little while. Unfortunately, I'm not saying pain is actually, I am saying pain is good. Okay. So pain is telling you to stop doing something, right? It's telling you there's a problem. And if you keep doing it, if you keep going closer to it, you're going to die. So stop, right? And yeah, it's complicated and you can't figure out what it is, but it's still trying to save your life, right? So um, I feel for people, right? Like pain is difficult. It's hard to watch somebody be in a lot of pain. And unfortunately, after decades of suppressing the pain and all the other discomfort, uncomfortable signals, there might be a lot of discomfort in store in order to get it all out of you so that you can actually be healthy. And we try to limit it as much as possible. So you actually can't go too quickly. You don't want to let it go too fast. You don't want to let it become too uncomfortable, because there's only so, like, the pipe to get the stuff out of you is only so big. Okay. Only so much can go through it at one time in one day. Right. So detox is something that you're going to have to spend a few months on, especially if you've been spending years avoiding it. 3 to 6 months, maybe, right? It's not even that long, considering somebody might have been doing the wrong things for 30 to 60 years. But you can get a lot out of just a few months. But you have to tell people that there will be these periods of discomfort. And this is really probably one of the most important reasons you have to be with somebody who's following you closely, is because 99.999% of people will get into the hot water and then they'll just jump right back out and they'll run away. And they were headed in the right direction. If they had kept going, they would have been fine. And they just got scared off by the detox reactions and by the symptoms of the treatment itself. So I didn't make the rules. Okay. So I'm not like happy that this is the way it is. It's just the way it is. This is reality. Okay. We have to accept reality that we live in. Right. And if you want to get better, not everyone does. Okay. I'm not going to guilt trip you if you don't want to get better. It's up to you. Right. If you don't want to really get better, if you want to continue the band-aids and just feel better and take like the steroid solutions, which are basically band-aids, and put off the problem until later where it's going to be even worse, that's your prerogative. My job is to try to convince you that that's actually what you're doing. And so that you're not thinking a falsehood that you're actually solving your problem and you're not passing the buck to your future self. That's what you're actually doing. When you're taking the painkiller now or the steroid now, you're passing the buck to the future. And the problem will very likely get worse because you have not gotten rid of the underlying cause of the problem. That underlying cause is still there. It's still hurting you and you just don't feel it anymore. So